Welcome back to another episode of Two Chiefs, One Mic podcast. I'm Scott Hughes.
And I'm Mike Hawkins.
And we are super excited to have our first guest appear on our show. We've asked Chief Adam Colon of the Franklin, Ohio Police Department to join us today. And Adam went through a tragedy when 2 years into his tenure as a police chief at a new organization, Canine Officer Fury was tragically killed in a car crash. And we've asked Chief Colon to join us today to kind of walk us through his experiences as he dealt with the tragic death of Canine Fury. So, Chief Colon, thanks for joining us today.
Thank you. Good morning.
Good morning. Mike, you were a canine officer for a while. You understand the bond between a canine and its handler and the effect that this canine had on the entire community, the entire department. Why don't you walk us through your experience as a canine, and then we'll jump in.
Yeah, and you mentioned at the end with the community. So the bond between a handler and the canine is unlike any other. Over your shoulder every second when you're driving, you can hear that breath, and you hear and get excited when you're pulling up to a call. They know what's going on. But I think outside of that, the community, they love stories about dogs. They love the canine program. It's such a huge community engagement tool as well as a law enforcement tool that people in town will do anything for that dog. So any tragedy, any story is a huge heartbreak to not only the department but the community. I remember when I lost my dog. I still felt, I thought I could hear him over my shoulder and sit there and look, and there's nobody there. So, a tragedy like Chief Colon has gone through really resonates through the whole town.
No doubt. Chief Colon, why don't you just give us a brief bio, kind of walk us through your career, walk us through getting the appointment there in the city of Franklin, and then we'll just kind of talk about that day.
Sure. Yeah. Been in the law enforcement journey of this that we do since about 1999. Well, I joined the Army, active duty, was an MP, stationed out in Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri, went to training out there, and I got stationed there. So, yay for me. But I re-enlisted, sent to Hawaii for about 4 years, a great time. Did mostly, we called it garrison, just patrol work, worked some investigations. And when I was in Hawaii, in particular, back when I had lots of hair and abs still, and got to wear an aloha shirt and khakis every day, which was a great gig for me. Got some good training, exited the Army and went about 2005 and came back to Ohio. Reasons unknown. But
just to clarify, you went from Hawaii to Ohio, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, I just wanted to make that sure. What? Not Michigan, but Ohio. Okay.
Yeah, northeastern Ohio, Lorain County. I was born up there, but I grew up in South Florida. So even then, why I didn't go back to West Palm Beach, where I grew up, after Hawaii again? Life choices put you in weird spots, but woulda, coulda, shoulda. So again, I went to the academy up in Lorain. Then I moved down to the Dayton, Ohio area, which I was hired at a city called Riverside. If you've ever been to the Air Force Museum, that's where Riverside's at. Odd city. I just thought that's how police work was, but what I learned was it's rather a busy and odd place for the size of the city and the population. Got a lot of good experience there, and just rose through the ranks. And back in 21, decided I'd like to be a police chief. So tried to put in for a few agencies, or one agency in particular, city of Franklin, and was lucky to be selected. Was appointed September of 2021, and I've been here ever since.
So you were appointed as police chief in September of 2021. What was the date that Canine Fury was killed?
November 11th, 2023, Veterans Day.
And as a veteran on Veterans Day. Wow.
Yeah.
So, you were hired from the outside, and, Mike and I have done other podcast episodes where we've talked about making that transition. So coming in from the outside with 2 years on the job, you're still trying to figure out the culture and probably trying to figure out what changes you want to make and all of that. And then you're handed this, just the worst thing that can happen to you as a police chief. Talk us through that day. Like, how did this event transpire? What were the officers doing? and then, probably have you talk about like, what went through your mind, like when this happened as the chief, and, we'll kind of go from there.
Yeah, so that was a Saturday morning. I think I was just drinking coffee, getting ready to go to the gym. Actually, my daughter had just texted me. My 17-year-old daughter at the time, who'd been in a few car accidents. So I got this PTSD when she would call me that something's wrong. So she texts me saying, "I got to tell you something. Don't be mad." So I was like, "Oh, great." And lo and behold, her new car that was replaced, someone backed into it at her friend's house. It wasn't her fault. So I was like, all right, it's the worst thing that's going to happen today. Then we'll deal with it. It's a dent in the door. Car's still drivable. She's okay. And then I got a phone call from my captain. He's like the assistant chief. He's below me. We have our structure here. It's myself and the captain. Um, and he doesn't necessarily call me either. If he usually sends me a text, we text back and forth. We see each other. So if he calls me, I generally know he's going to tell me about something. So when he called, he was kind of stuttering, and I could immediately tell there was something wrong in his voice, similar to we can tell someone on the radio when their normal, voice structure has changed. So he was telling me that there was a car accident between two of our officers, Officer Miller and Officer Butler. Officer Butler's a canine handler. Officer Miller was a lateral hire, very seasoned officer that we brought in from the city of Dayton. Um, and he was driving as field training. There was an accident, and their canine vehicle had been struck. Fury at that point, our canine Fury was injured, and there's a lot of, I guess, the fog of war. I just basically knew get my car and leave. So I was about 18 minutes out from the city, and so really unknown. And I don't try to when I have these encounters of critical incidents, and I know something's jacked up. I'm not the guy who keeps calling and texting. I appreciate the first response, and then I just get there, and I will, contact dispatch or look it up myself. But I try to leave the incident commander to supervisor alone. I just know that, hey, just get dressed and go. So that's just figuring out, all right, let's go there and see what's going on here. I know it's bad, but can't really describe how bad it is until you get to the scene itself.
So, just to be clear, you have your canine officer, Officer Butler. He is driving, and he is FTOing
Yeah,
another officer who's riding shotgun. So your canine Officer Butler is the canine handler who is FTOing this new officer. So they're in the same car together.
correct. So then that could be a little controversial point. I'm sure you get comments. Actually, Officer Miller was driving the canine vehicle. So that and I've had that occur in the past in my last agency where the canine handler happens to be an FTO just because you have to have a trainer. And so, but I know it could be like a sensitive topic, like nobody's driving my dog around. So
Yeah,
Miller was the driver of the vehicle. It's a Tahoe.
I got you. Well, I don't know. I mean, you're a typical suburban sized agency. You only have so many people and so many train officers, and I think one, at least in my experience, one issue that I saw wherever there was a canine deployment sometimes was that the patrol officers didn't really know what to do with respect to setting up perimeters, how dogs work. So, in one regard, I can see where that would be very beneficial. I mean, Mike, you were a canine handler. I don't think that's a problem, right?
No, even in our agency, our handler is an FTO. They have a lot of specialized training, but to your point, we have a lot of roll calls where the canine officer, or we have some trainers or master trainers even that are in our department. They'll sit down with the shift and explain to them your role when the canine is deployed, your role as a perimeter, your role as a backup. And I think you'll notice a lot of canine handlers were FTOs because they were go getters in the beginning, and they have that specialized training.
Yeah.
And I think it helps too because I've had incidents where the canine handler is actually injured, and who's going to take the dog? I mean, are you either going to call in another canine handler to just secure the dog for a short period of time, or a spouse if there's one. So having somebody who's comfortable being around, and we have officers that like to go train. Maybe they endeavor to be future canine officers, and they go to training and they'll take bites and lay tracks for them. So
Yeah,
it's
I
not
think
a bad idea, I think,
I
to
think it's a great
integrate
idea.
somebody to recover that dog if need be.
So walk us through what caused the crash, because I know, and in looking this up online, this is an interesting case. Walk us through who the driver was, what was he doing, why was he where he was at, that kind of stuff, if you don't mind.
Yeah, sure. Let's scroll over to get actually it's 21. So his name is the crash. They were driving on a river street, which is a one-way road that parallels the river. And they were just driving along on patrol. It was actually a very sunny November day. It was mild, mild enough that you could wear shorts that day. That sunny morning, and they're driving down the road, and Officer Miller has his radar on, and he's pinging on a car coming at him. You can tell it's moving, and he's like, that car's going the wrong way. So he makes a correction to avoid, to get out of the way, and as he does that, this vehicle, was a Jeep Patriot, matches those movements, and unfortunately was struck, and they were struck on. He was able to turn enough that he was struck on the driver's side, rear door, in the Tahoe. So they go spinning out into a church parking lot, take out a sign. The Jeep Patriot continues on, took out a church sign, and then hit a tree. So the person driving was named Michael Sims. He's from Kentucky. No association with the city of Franklin. No real association with the area outside of the city of Middletown, was just south of us. Apparently, his girlfriend's family was there. So the backstory was that this kid had some spat with her, and they were driving around the previous evening, this driving, pointlessly. And he had made some 911 calls and had pinged off a couple other dispatch centers, maybe being suicidal. So why he just kept on driving and ended up in Franklin was just the fates of where we were at that time, with him just appearing there. And then, of course, the officers being there.
Chief, before we get into the canine injury, how were your officers, first off, in that, injury wise? What happened to them?
So injury wise, they were banged up, obviously, from being struck, at a high speed, probably 70 plus, and the airbag deployment, but they weren't no prolonged, physical injuries. I think Officer Miller had a little bit more, the driver, than Officer Butler, some lingering, aches and pains, but they were not incapacitated. They were able to still get out of the vehicle.
So you get this phone call from your captain, and he delivers this news to you over the phone. You get in your car. You've got a little bit of a drive to get to the scene. What's going through your mind as a leader, as a police chief?
Well, you just start checking. Like, we'll first get there, and you're just thinking, like, what's call my city manager, call my boss, let him know, hey, this is what's going on. I don't know too much. This is what I know. And again, he left me alone, and then he proceeded, and I believe he called the mayor thereafter. He did his notifications with council and whatnot. So I'm just thinking, just get there. I know the officers are safe. They told me that they're okay, and they've both been transported to local hospital. Suspect, same thing. He's at a different hospital. At that point, I knew that Fury had succumbed to that injury and had become, passed away. So I just got there, and it's chaos. It's a cruiser. I've sent you those pictures recently. It's just a blown up. It looked like I hit an RPG or a IED or whatnot. At that point, it's kind of calm. There's lots of law enforcement there. The road's blocked off, of course. A lot of people standing around, and you're just kind of surveying. You're looking at debris just thrown about from the impact. And, there's a rifle that was thrown somehow out the door. It was just pieces everywhere. So that's point I'm starting to think, okay, officers are okay. Kind of like when I tell people, it's when you respond to a call, everybody's all excited. Is somebody still trying to hurt us? No. All right. We're safe. Is there anyone we can help? And then it's just slow down and preserve, evidence. So I was kind of checklisting, okay, what's going on? The State Patrol showed up, House State Patrol showed up. They were very helpful. They brought in, their on-duty sergeant, and a lot of higher ups started coming in for this. So it's just preservation of the scene and checklisting where what needs to go. And then at that point, I was all right. I need to go see the officers at the hospital.
So you knew. So just back up a second. So the Officer Butler and his recruit that he was training, they're okay. They were transported for precautionary purposes. You knew though that the Canine Fury did not survive at the scene, or did you not?
So I knew at that point when I arrived on scene, I can't recall if they called me on the phone and told me, but I'm pretty sure when I got there, they told me that he had, when they placed him into the medic, an actual city, fire medic, that he had en route to the emergency vet, he kind of did his last breath, and
Man, that's
So speaking of that, so
Yeah.
are you the one then to break the news to Officer Butler? How did that come about?
So after he, and I was just talking to him again the other day, and I've read the report and talked about it. We were talking again, and after after the accident, Officer Miller was able to get out immediately, and he just went straight, gave a look over to Butler, and then proceeded over to this guy. He's now in the car, and the suspect Sims, and Butler was able to get out of the vehicle also, and he also went over at that point. Miller had drew his weapon on the person, and Sims, who was climbing out of the Patriot, saying "Kill me, kill me." So he was able to handcuff him and detain him, with Butler then showing up to assist him. And he had to go back to the cruiser, and Fury was stuck. He couldn't get him out the door. And we'll talk about that. The compartment setup that I didn't design for that canine vehicle, if you want to. But he had to go to the slider, as you mentioned, and cut through the airbag. The airbags are deployed, and go to the slider, open it up, and like drag him out. He's a big dog. He was like 115 pound German Shepherd. He was rather big, kind of frightening looking. But so he got him out, and he seemed okay, and it was kind of, whimpering, but he then started to pee, and blood came out. So at that point, Officer Butler knew, and the medics had arrived. He's like, "You got to take me to the hospital." Actually, he wanted to drive himself in another car. I can remember watching the body cam telling, "Give me your car, give me your car. I need to go to the hospital." He was actually calling on the radio to get another canine handler in for his vehicle to take him to the hospital, which wouldn't have been so effective to get there in a timely manner. So he was going to drive, and like, "No, you can't drive." And there was some back and forth with the medics saying, "Well, we can't transport a dog," but actually in Ohio you can. They changed the law that they can transport a police dog, what I was told. And so they put him into the ambulance to take him to MedVed, which is like a 24-hour facility.
How long had Officer Butler been a canine handler?
Just right before I was hired. So June of 21.
And was this his first dog?
It was his first dog.
Wow.
Yeah.
So yes, obviously Butler is affected by this. Obviously, how did he handle this? How did the agency process all this? How's Butler doing today?
Well, the agency is devastated, and it's odd that if we post a story about we arrested so and so for abusing a dog, how much outpour you'll see on the local news, social media, or our own if we shared it, the comments, and they could blink an eye sometimes if a police officer is assaulted, because not all people like cops, but generally everybody likes a dog. Like most people do, the kids are not, they love animals. So Butler obviously is devastated. He's at the hospital. I go see him. He's surrounded by canine handlers. When I pull up, to the emergency room section, I see all the different canine handlers, vehicles. So I'm sure some are off duty, some are working. They all rush to get there because you're a canine handler. I would say they're needier than their dog, but they stick together, and they're a unique bunch that think they can't shine their boots, but they really can.
So what did you learn about your leadership style through this? And again, you've been there for 2 years. You're still trying to figure out, what you're doing with respect to the agency and the direction and the culture, and you're learning all the personalities, and there's just so much stuff going on. And, what did you learn about, yourself as a leader?
Right. So, when I came here, I was the boogeyman, of this person from the outside. Everybody's distrusting. I was like, well, how do you think I feel? Like, there's all of you. There's 35 of you in total, and I'm just one person. And the youngest officer knows more than me about the current agency and how things function and how things work in the city. So it was a lot of, for that point, just building relationships, gaining trust, finding who I can, um, use as my unofficial, join my team, stakeholder type people in the organization. So at that point, I had a pretty good relationship with the officers. I was, they got past the who's this guy, and his changes, and I was accepted. I'm a participative leader. I obviously changed how I lead for the situation. But I generally am easy to get along with, and I try to, be informed of what's going on and have conversations with people and be present as best as I can. So I just think that by continuing that process of already being, present, and communicating with clearly Officer Butler and Officer Miller, who were involved, and making sure that their immediate needs were taken care of, at the time physically, and how we're going to go forth from here. Just continue to do that. You just got to show, you got to, like, lead with compassion, continue to lead with compassion. And I teach some sergeants in a course here in Ohio, new sergeants, and a lot of feedback I get is that their leaders are just absent. They might as well put their office across the street in the city building or wherever, and they're kind of not present, and they don't know what's going on in the organization. So, I don't know if I answered that correctly. I just felt that being showing compassion and continue to show compassion of for him and the organization in total, because obviously with dispatchers, they love the dog. We have other officers that love dog, and like you said, a community love the dog. Just showing, or Fury, calling him a dog, but just being present and showing I care. It's like, I'm human too. I heard you say I'm just a cop with rank. You said, like, on your other podcast. Well, I'm a human with, a rank too. So I'm not, an animal lover and owner too. So I understand how, this affected him. And I know Mike can talk more about being a handler and how that works with your family and living.
Well, yeah, it's different. But Chief, back to your point, moving forward. So how did the community react, and what did you do moving forward? Another canine program? Did Officer Butler uh, put in for the canine program? Did he want part of it? How did that go forward after this?
Yeah, absolutely. Community is awesome. Franklin's a great community. It's I always say it's like American flag and apple pie, and they're pretty pro military, pro law enforcement, pro fire. They're pro their schools. It's a really really tight knit community. A lot of generations keep living here. Um, so the community is super supportive. City staff super supportive. My boss, the mayor. Um, he's very military guy, and he's worked in our business, so he knows how that works, and the council itself. um I told Butler right from the beginning, you don't have to think about this right now, but if you want another dog, you're gonna get. So I made that clear. Like, sorry, your dog gonna die. It's someone else. Because I do have in a small organization. I think it's important that we allowed the other officers to have a chance to do something else and different. So a lot of places, even small organizations, like, well, if you're a canine handler, you're a canine handler for life. Well, I don't really
Yes.
buy into that.
Yeah. See, I was one of the exceptions. I agree with you. I'm in an agency right now. We have 35 sworn. And you see canine handlers, because it's specialized training, they want to stay in this, and you get another dog, and then they can become master trainers. I was always belief smaller agencies need to share the wealth. When my turn's over, it should be somebody else's. But again, you end in a tragedy like this after a short time, that changes that story.
Yeah, absolutely. So he was, Fury was 3, and he only had been 2 years in service, essentially, with training and what, 2.5 years ish, I guess, at that point. But made it clear to him, like, when you're ready, we're not talking about this right now. We'll you'll get another dog. I think I even told him that at the hospital. Like, and all I could do at the hospital is laying there, sitting in the room with his parents around, the wife, and tearful canine handlers, and I give him a hug, give him a little kiss on the chest, and love you, man. We'll be all right. We'll get through this. And proceeded on from there.
That's a great point, Adam. Chief Cologne. I think that small gesture, and you said what nothing really I could do. I just leaned down and gave him a little kiss on the forehead, said we'll be good. Like that right there, though, speaks so much to your leadership style, and it speaks so much to how much you care about your officer, and you view them as more than just a badge number. That that moment right there sent, you know, I don't know what the word is what I'm trying to say, but other than that's badass that you did that, because I think there's a lot of people out there that would not do that. As much as I hate to say that, I think there's probably some that hopefully we'll learn a lot from listening to you and kind of walking us through what you went through. So kudos for doing that, because you just mentioned this with respect to his wife was there, and I don't know if you said children or not, but you know Mike knows this, having a dog at your house, that's part of your family, right? And, his wife and children, if he has any, like, they're all impacted by this.
Yeah. They actually, his daughter was 3 and she was 2 days older than Fury. So
Yeah.
they grew up together. So when he had Fury at his home, the little baby, it's Tyler at the point, she's seeing the dog, and these dogs are protective of the spouse and children, and not only the benefit of they become part of the home. Canine, a lot of canine handlers won't even go on vacation because I can't leave my dog, or they want to kennel them. So it's very they could become part of that family.
No doubt. You find places that will allow a police dog, a service dog, and they go everywhere with you. We had one of our handlers everywhere. Florida, it didn't matter. The dog went with him because it is part of the family. It's a bond that people that haven't done it, it's so much different than a family dog, right? That people have. It's a partner. Somebody watches your back all the time. It's amazing. But Chief, you touched on something. So you get a new dog, right?
Mhm.
And
Yes.
you touched on something. I haven't read anything about it. You talked about the insert. You didn't design it. Was there an issue with it, or was it prefab? Was it made? What was the deal with that?
It was a good insert. I just know from my experience in my previous agency with our canine units, they didn't have a partition. They had a partition, but they didn't have a prisoner transport section. And I thought that no, now the dog had the Fury had the back of the Tahoe, also additional room. But I just never liked, first off, I get it, like, oh, canine handlers, you never have to transport prisoners. Well, it's part of the game. It's just what is, versus what you stick a person next to him with a dog barking at him. So I've never thought that was like a good thing. But when I came here, the cruisers were set up that there was a transport function of the partition in which the person could sit on the passenger side in the back seat handcuffed, like a very small area. So I'm not a scientist or by no means a crash expert, but I'm just thinking when it struck his door that he went in and out of, that maybe give him a little less room, and he probably bounced off that partition, I would guess. Um, so I just, the new going forward, when we designed new vehicles, we took that out. We got him a Durango, and we just got a full. It's smaller anyhow than a Tahoe, but we just got a full back seat for him. Per se, the back seat didn't have that prisoner partition portion to it. So again, I don't know if that played a factor in it, but I was thinking a big dog, and then if he's getting struck and he's probably flying over, and that you can't seatbelt a dog, so there's always a risk when there's an accident to begin with. But maybe having a little more room would help.
Let me ask you this, Chief. And that's a great point, that you bring up. But I think a lot of agencies, because of personnel and how many people you have working the streets, that's probably the biggest reasons why those are set up that way, as you alluded to. So you can serve the transport as well. But that's a great point for chiefs listening, or other folks in the risk management side of the house. Were there any other changes or recommendations that you would bring up for someone who's either starting a program, currently managing a canine program, any policies, training, wanting to expand the program, anything along those lines that are kind of like lessons learned as a result of this tragedy? Because, at some point, you have to go back to being the chief, and you have to evaluate the organization and ensure that we do everything we can to prevent something like this from happening again, which some of these are just unpreventable, right? But anything in regards to policy, training, equipment, anything else?
Well, speaking of training, they trained a lot. They actually trained 4 times a month, like weekly, when in Ohio, it's required 16 hours. So our agency and other agencies around here were actually training once a week, so 4 times a month, which does cause a drain because now someone has to cover for this person while they're off. So continue to make sure they're getting the minimum training, and when I say minimum, if you can do more, if that's allowing them to do stuff while working with another officer that's interested to continue to train and stay up on their stuff, and send them to additional trainings outside the training. There's plenty of conferences and advanced training, even legal training. Mr. Meter has a legal training for Canine, so we've sent him to that. The biggest takeaway to me, I don't think our training was in a deficit at all, but the partition part, just once we replacing that again, I don't know if that's a factor. I just felt that it wasn't necessary to have. And we have, we'll use the pit technique, and we have a pit bumpers, nice ones on the cars, but I kind of put it out there like the Canines on board, you're not going to initiate a pit unless it's some crazy situation. From the times we have done it, most of the time our cruisers end up damaged, even with these fancy Satina bumpers. So I just want to mitigate any type of risk to that canine in the vehicle with a canine handler who doesn't have a seatbelt and is not afforded, I guess, the ability to think in an accident like humans can. So unless that's a critical, deadly force situation, I don't want that canine handler with a vehicle or a canine on board to try to initiate a pit. And also, I would say that, and I've seen this happen, in my past agency, we've had some crazy incidents of, officer involved shootings, rolling gunfights with guys shooting out the car when they're for 30 minutes while they've been pursuing them. And I know other agencies bigger than mine with a lot more money who had officers, critical incident, officer involved shooting, leave them on an island. They just don't, you're off, admin leave. They don't talk to them. They didn't send them to speak to anybody. Person had to go on their own, which I was surprised at the size of the agency and their reputation that they would do that. But, we made sure that they both were, sent to a local Dr. Platani, who deals with PTSD and is really good. He's a psychologist, Army veteran. Was at the Fort Hood attack. She was there, part of, victim of it. So we sent him to her, both of them, and made sure that they can go as much as they want, and the city would pay for it until they were good to go.
So obviously, in the days following this tragedy, you do a memorial service for Canine Furies. And we'll try and post some photos and maybe some links in the show notes that can take our listeners or viewers to look at some of that, how the community came out and law enforcement came out. Any one moment that stood out to you during that? And second question is, moving forward, how do you honor the legacy of Canine Fury and continue leading this department forward?
Yeah, the memorial was, we knew we were going to have something, obviously. Then the more and more we got into it, we discovered it's like kind of like a full, honors for a fallen officer on duty. And there was a kind of a protocol, but not a lot. I was getting a lot of stuff sent to me and shared with me from other canine handlers or supervisors. So we thought, but we essentially very similar to a ceremony for which, a memorial for which an officer killed in line of duty, the protocol for that. A takeaway with a lot of support. We didn't let the community in itself, like people from the street, but we, just people that we invited, and mostly law enforcement. We got the whole department to be there. The other agencies cover the road for a bit for us. Takeaway, just having to stand up there in front of people. The slideshow we put together with some music, that was just to kick it off. was kind of powerful, just seeing it. Then you have to speak and, not choke up. Your department sitting in front of you. Alex, Officer Butler, sitting in front of his wife, holding Fury's remains. At that point, he had put him on the he carried him in and put him onto like a table with a flag. After that, so that was powerful in itself. Different people speaking and trying not to, choke up myself. I think when somebody said they saw me choking up, and a couple officers started choking up because I was choking up because I'm supposed to, keep the face. It's kind of hard to do. Afterwards, when we call the long walk. I don't know if you're familiar. When they carrying his remains, the canine handlers kind of set up a gauntlet, and Butler walked down with the remains with his wife, and he had a newborn child at the time too, but she was holding the 3-year-old. And there's a picture, a very powerful picture that you can see him holding the remains, and his wife standing behind him with the baby, 3-year-old, and giving her like a kiss. And so that's a strong picture. I'll remember that one for a long time.
Chief, I read a story. I was looking it up yesterday, and I guess Canine Fury had a bloodline that had other canines in surrounding departments. Is it true that there was a son, I guess, of Canine? Okay, I thought.
Yeah,
Can you tell us about that?
Mention that. Actually, I thought when you asked me, and I was going on my rant here and kind of forgot. But yeah, so Fury, he was black. He was all like sable, German Shepherd. Never had to bite anyone because when he catch them, they were like, "I'm done." They don't want any of the smoke of him. But he, the breeder trainer said, "Hey, he's a really good dog. I'd like to, if you don't mind." So they bred him. Not for profit or nothing for us, but they, he had a son. He was about 1 at the time. That canine handler from some small department in Ohio wanted to come with him. And so during the procession or the ceremony, or memorial, when I was reading, I said, in fact, Fury lives on. And then the handler walked up from the back with his son, and he walked up to Alex, and literally the dog like jumped on and kissed him. So yeah,
Wow.
He like jumped up and like started licking his face. And I don't think it was much prompted. He just stopped there, and he just, who knows? But yeah, maybe he's just a friendly dog. But he looks just like him, a little smaller because he's younger. So that's kind of cool.
That is wild.
Yeah.
Chief, as we kind of wrap this up, kind of reflect back on this, what's one thing you know now that you didn't know before this happened?
It's all good until it goes bad. They like to say that saying, but you always got to prepare and think of different things. And again, it's not the first time I've, knock on wood, and thankfully never had to deal with one of my own officers that was seriously injured or killed. But we've had some other crazy things occur in my career, but I like to say, try to prepare and play the what if game. Just sit back and what am I going to do for this situation? How am I going to handle this situation? And you never know until you know, but the best thing you do is constantly prepare. Luckily, like I can reach out. I've got a good peer network. I mean, when you're the chief, it's a lonely island. Like, who do I ask about? And can't blame anyone but yourself. But it's try to, you got that, as going to the NA and being in law enforcement and coming up in the ranks with other people and around here and in my career, try to reach out and, hey, what would you do with this situation? Do you have a plan for this? I have no problems, borrowing, stealing, and taking from someone else if they got a good program set up. So always try to plan for the unknown the best you can. And it's just, odd to say, how do you do that? You can think of so many different scenarios, but just try to be prepared for the unknown and make sure you take care of your people, however that is.
I think that's the key takeaway, taking care of your people. And Scott, you've said it, you exist to take care of your people and give them everything you need. And it's a situation like this that shows them, after only 2 years or less, that you are here to take care of them, no matter how bad that situation is.
Yeah, we had insurance on the city had insurance. So we found out our policy covered the replacement of the canine and training. It was up to like $25,000 or maybe 30. So it was more than enough to cover. That was just for the dog portion and handler training. But other places don't have anything. When a lot of places put together a canine program, they're scrapping together equipment to try to outfit a car and whatever else. But there's a lot of organizations out there. The National Canine Law Enforcement, get that right. I'll say it wrong. I have it written down here. Excuse me. But there's, they'll offer, a couple of places offer just to outright replace him. A local FOP had money set aside. They were willing to. Tons of donations, tons of cards. I gave all the cards. I'm talking about cards and blankets and police cards from other agencies. And I would look at them because they're addressed to me, and I'd give them to Alex. But I kept one because I thought it was cool. I kept the one from
Sheriff Judd. Yeah.
Oh, they kept the one,
America's favorite sheriff.
I just thought it was funny, but
That's awesome.
You'll have a lot of organizations out there that are willing to, bounce you back in the feed, and it was a great support and outreach. So unfortunate situation, but it was nice to be reaffirmed how much people care about our police organization and probably police in general. I don't buy into everybody hates police. I think it's a false narrative, out there, but it's just reassuring that our community really supports us and has our back. It's a National Police Dog Foundation. They'd cover up to $25,000.
Wow.
Yeah, for us, they raise money. We just went to their memorial in May of last year. They have an annual memorial right before Police Week. It's a pretty big fun. It was a pretty big event too for a couple of days having us down there in DC.
Mike, is there anything as we wrap up that you specifically want to ask Chief Colon?
I think we've handled a lot of it. Love to have you back on and talk about your experiences. Based on our first episode, we talked about things we didn't know. What is one piece of advice that you would give to a new chief, or maybe a person aspiring to become a chief?
Don't forget where you came from. I mean, that's the cliche saying of, you got to be a good cop to be a good leader, I think. So if you were never a really good cop, then how are you expected to be a good leader? Have compassion when you're leading. Don't think that you're on some magical pedestal, which you're so far disconnected from the people you lead that you can't relate to them and have, conversations with them about how are they doing. Doesn't have to be police work. You could be about their kids' soccer tournament or whatever they're doing, the vacation they went on. Don't get disconnected and try to be around, be present, like Abe Lincoln, lead by wandering around, just be there. And as I said, I came from the outside, so you got to be careful on even how you question something, because your questioning, which may be legitimate, they think you're attacking their culture and how things work. I can remember I could be staring at a wall reading something, and they'd be suspicious on what I was looking at. I'm just trying to learn. So you just gotta.
I don't know if that's somebody from the outside or inside. I think that might be any chief that gets.
Yeah.
They're always wondering what you're thinking.
Yeah, even an inside guy, you think you get promoted up, and now you may have a more difficult time because you have those relationships with the people that you hung out with and came up with, and now you're their boss. So just, I don't know, I guess it's cliche. Don't forget where you came from and keep being a cop. Again, if you weren't a good cop, you probably would never be a good leader. Can't be a good leader leading cops if you were a
lot of canine guys become chiefs, right? I look at my area, a lot of guys that I was in canine with become chiefs of police, which is strange, but it happens.
Yeah, and we talked about that too with the canine handlers remaining in a position. I just think that it's important, especially in a small organization, which I think most police departments are. Give other people a chance to do other stuff and move people around, and don't let anyone get too comfortable in one spot. And at the very minimum, you have a very knowledgeable former canine handler or former detective back on the road who would probably make a good sergeant when they get diversified in their skill set.
Awesome. Well, Chief, listen, we appreciate you coming on and sharing the tragedy with Canine Fury. Our hope is that, unfortunately, because of your experiences in this tragedy, will help make someone else better when the worst thing that could possibly happens. So thank you for coming on. We appreciate you taking the time to join us today. And if anybody needs to get a hold of you, we'll post your information in the show notes, because there may be chiefs out there, aspiring chiefs, who would like to maybe have deeper conversations and specific to what you went through.
I appreciate it. It was a good conversation. I thank you for asked me to come speak with y'all.
Rob,
right.
thank you.
Thanks.
Take care.
Bye.
Wow.